Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, and here in Reykjavik it's a nice, crisp, snowy day. It's light outside, we've got some blue sky and some sunset. Sunsets last a really long time in Iceland at this time of the year, so if the skies are clear you can get a really beautiful couple of hours of pink and orange skies, which looks especially nice when there is white snow on the rooftops and the ground. So it's a lovely day here. It's the middle of the Christmas break. I have been doing Games of the Year episodes for the last few episodes. I had some wonderful guests on. I had an episode with Brad Galloway from So Video Games. It was a real pleasure to talk to Brad. He always brings some interesting games to the table. I had Reagan Kelly from the Short Game on, which was really nice. I'm a long-time fan of the Short Game. It was great to talk to Reagan. And I also had on Louis from Time Played 3HR. I always really appreciate Louis' taste in games. So those three episodes were really nice. It was really good to hear from the hosts of three of my favourite podcasts about their games of the year. And I kind of sprinkled in some of my games of the year whilst we were having those conversations, especially in the one with Brad, because that was the first one. And so I threw in a lot of my games of the year there too. But it occurred to me that there isn't really a definitive kind of Gaming in the Wild Games of the Year episode of all of the top games that I covered in the last 12 months. And so I thought I would do one more Games of the Year episode. This time it will be my own top 10 and a bunch of honourable mentions. There were I've got I think 16 games on my list here, and they're organised into a top 10 and then a few honourable mentions of games that I really enjoyed this year that perhaps didn't scrape into that top 10 for one reason or another, but were still very much worthy of a mention and of flagging up to you in case it's something that you might want to try, in case it's something that you might want to play. That's my favourite aspect of Games of the Year lists. I think it's the best time to get a really clear, distilled view on some fun games that might be fun to try out, on what people have really enjoyed in the year, and best of all is the surprises. It's games that you haven't heard of that have sprung up in people's lists. I was particularly excited when Louis or Brad or Reagan would mention a game that I hadn't played. For example, I bought Death Crown. That was a recommendation from Brad, and I've been playing that over the Christmas holidays. I bought Steampunk Tower 2. There was a whole bunch of games that those guys recommended that I was really interested in trying. So it's a really fun time of the year because people are really talking about the games they want to celebrate, the games that they've really enjoyed. It's less about evaluation of games and reviews and more about celebrations and recommendations. And so that's something that I really enjoy. It's an aspect of critique that I love. I love to hear people that are passionate about games tell me what their favourites are. And it's a great way to find some things to play. So it's a really fun time of the year. I mean, as you can tell from the fact that I did 4 episodes rounding up 2021, it's something that I really enjoy doing, and it's something that I really enjoy hearing. So this episode is my own personal roundup of 2021. I hope you enjoy it. I've made full episodes on most of these games. There is only one game in this list that I haven't made a full episode on, and that's because I played it over the holidays and it sneaked in right at the death. So if you want to hear full reviews of the games that I'm talking about, because I'm just going to do little summaries of them here, and talk about why I loved them so much and why they made this list. But there are whole half-hour or 1-hour long episodes where I really comb through the gameplay of those games and talk about their development and talk about their reception, and talk about who published them and all of the little ins and outs, the visuals, the gameplay loop, all of the things that I liked about them. So there are full episodes out there if you would like more on these games. In fact, I will put in the show notes links to those full episodes next to the names of the games in this Game of the Year episode, if you would like to find those full episodes. And before I do launch into this list, please do also allow me to mention that this show is patron supported. So if you enjoy this episode, or if you're a long-time listener who would like to support the show, who thinks that this holiday period is a good time to throw in $1 a month to support Gaming in the Wild next year, you can do so at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. from $1 a month or euro or pound, for which you'll get extra episodes. I just published an episode because the PlayStation Network has a huge sale on with over 1,000 games, and I looked through all of them and pulled out the ones that I thought were best, or the best deals or bargains, or the most underrated games, and made a little podcast, a half-hour podcast, outlining 35 great games that are in the PlayStation sale. So you'll get episodes like that as a patron. You'll also get access to the Discord server. I've just reorganized it a little bit with some new channels and things like that. There's a lovely bunch of people there. All of the patrons of the show gather there and talk about games, recommend games, and talk about what they're playing. And there's some other fun perks as well. Like I'll do occasional Patreon text posts, reviews, quick little snippets of fun things. So there's lots of benefits to being a patron, but most of all, it lets me know that you enjoy the show and that you value the show. And that's a really great feeling for me. I love all of my patrons, so thank you very much to all of my patrons. And if you would like to become one, it's patreon.com/gaminginthewild. And with that out of the way, let's move on to this Games of the Year, Gaming in the Wild end of year episode. So I'm going to start off with some honourable mentions. These are the games that didn't quite scrape into that top 10, but which left an impression on me, games that I had a good time with across the year. I'm going to rattle through these quite quickly. The first one is Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Now, this is a game that I would not have probably bought unless it came packed in with my PS5. So when I finally got a PS5 this year from Argos, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was the game that came in the box. So it was the first game I played on my PS5, and I have to say, it was a really pleasant surprise. I have never played Ratchet & Clank games before, but I am a huge fan of 3D platformers. I used to play Spyro, I used to play Mario 64, and was around when that genre kind of came to be. And so it's always had a special place in my heart, and I feel nostalgic for 3D platform games. And Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is a perfect 3D platformer with a very modern sheen to it. The gameplay is very slick and fast. There is a skating mechanic, there is a great double jump. You can skate really fast and double jump off ramps and go really far. Ratchet has loads of different guns which have really fun effects. They are worth mentioning. Like there's one called the Ricochet, and you fire a bullet at an enemy, and if you hit the fire button again in rhythm, that bullet will hit them again and again and again from side to side. So this Ricochet bullet will kind of slap the enemy around in the most hilarious way. There's also this very, very powerful rocket launcher. There are area effect bombs and all kinds of different weapons that you get throughout the game that keep the gameplay really fresh. So you're running around different worlds, you're collecting things, you're doing side quests, you're hopping from planet to planet. It's like a Pixar spectacular. So if you like Pixar type atmosphere and that look, then Ratchet & Clank is a really good game. I really recommend it. It's a game that surprised me. It's a game that did more than I thought it would. And it was a great game to play on a brand new PS5. The graphics are spectacular, and it looks brilliant, and it plays very well. That was a really, really good game, Ratchet & Clank. For anyone who got a PS5 for Christmas, who's leafing through the store, I say grab that game. It will make you feel very good about your new PlayStation 5. It certainly did for me. That's Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. The next one that I have here is the opposite side of the scale, really. If Ratchet & Clank is a huge AAA system seller, then the next one is a tiny indie game. It's called Sludge Life. It was made by a very small team. It has music by Dose One, who is behind Anticon Records, a label that I really like. It's a first-person exploration game, I guess you could say, like a parkour game, where you move through a world that's very sludgy, very purple and grey, with line-drawn graphics, very, very stylized. And it's kind of a world that exists under the heel of capitalism, you could say. There's lots of pollution everywhere. There is a mining company that everyone works at. No one's very happy about the wages that they get. There's a strong sense of dissatisfaction running through all the characters that you meet. But there's also a strong sense of humour running through the game too. And you play a graffiti artist called Ghost. And what you have to do is run through this game, finding different collectibles and then parkouring your way up to huge blank walls where you will tag them. You'll tag them with your tag Ghost. You'll do either a small name tag that just says Ghost, or you'll do up to huge murals that cover an entire wall. And so it's kind of a puzzle problem-solving game in that you have to get from the ground level, which is just covered in sludge, all the way up to these teetering towers, up to the sides of blocks of flats, to tag as much as you can. And as you tag, your reputation grows. You get more options, more spots will open up for you to tag. There are objects that you can find, such as a teleportation device and a glider that will open up the movement even more. And there's a great soundtrack. It has this very sludgy hip-hop soundtrack that plays all around the game world as you find like music players dotted through offices and hideaways where other graffiti artists hang out. There's a pirate radio station who is transmitting. You can go and talk to him. And the music is playing. So as you approach like a music player, the music will play as if it's in the game world. So as you're running around the world, the music feels very organic and a big part of the game. It's just a really, really fun one. I played this one a lot. I 100%ed it. I really enjoyed my time with it. Sludge Life, not to be overlooked. I played it on Switch. I think it's a great fit there, and I really recommend that game. If it's got like a Mirror's Edge feel to the way that you're grappling up ledges and doing running jumps. You really do get a strong sense of slick movement and parkour in this funny world. Give it a try. That's Sludge Life. The next one that I've got here almost scraped onto my top 10. It's Death's Door. Now, this was an isometric Zelda-like in which you play a young crow who's having a bad day at the office. They work at the Bureau of Death and they harvest the souls of the dead. But one of the souls has gotten away, and so this young crow embarks on a strange adventure through a hidden world where these very old beings are trying to evade death in various ways. And one of them is the Urn Witch, who lives in a huge estate in a mansion house. One of them is a Frog King, who lives in a swamp with brightly coloured walkways dotted across it. There's a mountain top. There's various locations that you get to, different villages. You can talk to people. You can upgrade your weapons. It has a pretty straight up dodge roll combat. So lots of dodging, lots of using the bow, lots of using your sword. There are some spectacular bosses in this game. There is fantastic music. The music in Death's Door is really worth mentioning. It was very special and it added a lot to my experience. This was a very well put together game. It was really nice to play. The only reason that it didn't scrape into the top 10 is that the last couple of bosses are a huge pain in the ass. They really slow the game down. I hit a wall with those two bosses, and it really took the shine off the experience for me. So when I think back to Death's Door, I think about having a great time and being really quite addicted to the game as I moved through that world, puzzle solving, meeting the bosses, meeting all of the very surreal, interesting, quirky characters that you meet throughout your journey. But I also think about being incredibly frustrated by the end of the game and kind of wishing it would end, which is never a good feeling. So whilst I'm happy to give Death's Door an honourable mention, I will say that those last two bosses kicked my ass a little too much and kind of slowed the game down. There is some quite challenging combat in Death's Door. There are these arena battles where you'll be sealed in and have to fend off waves to move on. So it can be quite tough. But it's a really well put together game, wonderful music, lovely isometric graphics, very clean in design. It's just a really good video game. And the same can be said for Psychonauts 2. This is the 3D platformer, long in development, a sequel to an old game, Psychonauts. developed by Double Fine. This is one in which you play Raz, aka Rasputin Aquato. He's a young psychic kid who has been scouted to join the Psychonauts, who are kind of like James Bondy secret agents who go into people's minds to untangle their psychological problems and to find out who has done crime and that kind of thing. This was really enjoyable, I think, especially compared to Ratchet and Clank, which is very cool, very next-gen, very slick and fun, but a little basic in some ways. Like, there's nothing unexpected about it, and I felt like I'd seen it before, which is maybe why it was an honourable mention and not a top 10 pick. Psychonauts 2 is very different to that. It's very imaginative. Some of the minds that you will go into allow for some quite wild environments, like you'll enter the mind of a crazy dentist and find that an office block turns into a kind of the inside of a mouth with gums and tongues and teeth sticking out of the walls. It's quite nightmarish. And you'll also go into the mind of a gambling addict, where the inside of their mind is a hospital that has been repurposed into a strange casino. And so it's very imaginative. It's wildly imaginative throughout. It has a really fun open hub world where you get to explore a lake and a forest and meet Rasputin's family. It has some fun abilities that you'll get as you move through the game. You get to unlock abilities as you move through it. It was a really good, solid game and a really good, solid play. For the first half of it, I was really in love with this game. I thought it was a little soft in the second half. It outstayed its welcome a little bit. By the time it got to the end, I was really happy it was over. A little like Death's Door, so it's a solid 8 out of 10 game for me, I think. I recommend it. That's Psychonauts 2. And that was the last of the honourable mentions, so let's move on. The number 10 in my games of the year for 2021 is a game that I discovered via Louis at Time Played 3HR, who streamed a little bit of it. He played a really small amount of it, but I was really taken with it. I went and bought it on Steam. It's a really atmospheric, relaxed, ambient sort of puzzle game with a wonderful soundtrack called Cloud Gardens. This was a really interesting game. You're presented in this game with a cloudy screen with a kind of a pink hue in the background, or sometimes grey, sometimes orange, a hazy background. And sticking out of the clouds is a diorama, a little square of ground where you'll see a ruined scene, say a shed or a collapsed bridge or an old building or a disused rail yard. And it's made in this really cool 3D voxely kind of style, but it's really detailed. And what you have to do is plant seeds that will then grow. And as you plant seeds in proximity to each other, whether it's a climbing plant or whether it's a monstera or some moss or all of these different kinds of seeds that you will get, as you plant them in proximity to each other, they will all grow. And they will grow in real time, and they'll start to grow over the diorama that you're looking at. And when the diorama is completely overgrown, then you move on to the next level. And I found this to be an amazingly relaxing and engaging experience. I was really taken with it. I drifted through levels upon levels upon levels of Cloud Gardens. And I think in the end I had about 12 hours in this game, which really took me by surprise. It's simple. You can rotate the landscape, you can look at all of the details of this human-free, this post-human world that you're looking at, and you're reclaiming it. You play kind of as some kind of invisible gardener or as a force of nature itself, and your job is to reclaim these human landscapes, these wrecked landscapes. There's something slightly sad and melancholic about it. I think partly because it's a post-human world, and partly because it's so abandoned. But this world is so wrecked and broken, and the act of overgrowing it is kind of putting to rest humanity in some strange way. I don't know. I had an interesting thought process about this one, and whether it was an eco game or not, whether it was a puzzle game or not, and I do talk through it in full in the episode, so if you'd like to hear more about Cloud Gardens, then please do go and listen to that episode. But I will say here that it was a very memorable time. It was like going into a trance playing this game. Talking about it now is making me want to go back to it. I think I was about 70% of the way through the game. It just keeps going and going and going. There is also a creative mode for people who like that kind of thing, where you can use all of the objects that you found to make your own worlds. And there are some really good ones. You can follow Cloud Gardens on social media to see the kind of creations that people have made. This was a really interesting game. That's Cloud Gardens. The next game that I've got is another game that took me by surprise, but very, very different, in a very different way. It's a AAA game, one of only 2 in my top 10. The rest are all indie games. It's Forza Horizon 5 by Microsoft, and it's an Xbox exclusive that dropped on Game Pass. It's an open world driving game in which you race around the world. You can enter races. You kind of snap between open world exploration, driving to points where you can do story missions, you can do time trials, you can do crazy stunts and jump off mountaintops, all kinds of things, all of which gives you points, all of which gives you currency. The wheels are always spinning upwards, the numbers are going up as you're playing this game. It's a driving game that has dirt races, that has jungle tracks, that is set in Mexico and has vast sand dunes, motorways and little mountainside towns, loads of different cars. You get new cars all the time, from beach buggies to Ferraris to test drive vehicles to like formula cars. And it has such a vast array of driving options in it that I got so addicted to Forza Horizon 5. It was my first Forza game, and I was really taken aback by what I found. It's very addictive, very fun, and you really get into a flow state playing Forza. You really just flow from task to task and from race to race, just building up your garage of cars, just winning races, just honing your skills. The open world is beautiful, the weather effects are beautiful, the landscape is beautiful, the cars look amazing and sound amazing. It's a very hype game, it's very up. Like, there is a radio station you can listen to. There are several radio stations, like hip-hop and breakbeat and pop music, and they all have about 10 songs each that are on a loop, and you'll hear things being announced over the radio from this Forza Horizon racing festival in which you're taking part. So I had a really fun time with that one. I certainly was not expecting to love it as much as I did, and I wasn't expecting to see it here at number 9 on my Games of the Year list, but here it is. That's Forza Horizon 5. My number 8 game for the year is The Artful Escape. This is a psychedelic rock opera of a game. Really enjoyable, psychedelic, brightly coloured journey. It's basically a left-to-right game where you just run, you do a little bit of platforming, you can hold down a button to solo, and your player character will do guitar solos over the spectacular psych rock backing music that just permeates the whole game. It has a beautiful visual style where you're jumping through strange crystalline landscapes of alien planets and alien cities. It has a kind of a Bill and Ted story where you're a young musician who is plucked from obscurity and made into this interstellar rock star. It's very silly, it's very joyful, it's a very simple game. It's about 3 hours long, but I smiled from beginning to end. This was a joyful experience. It's on Game Pass. I really recommend trying it. It was one of the most colourful, sensory experiences that I had in gaming this year. That's The Artful Escape. At number 7 is a game that I consider to be one of the most underrated games of the year. I talked about it recently in that PlayStation Sales Patron episode that I made. It's Griftlands. It's a card game RPG in which you have 3 different storylines, but in the first storyline you play as Sal, a young grifter who has returned from indentured servitude and gone on a mission to get revenge for the person who put them there. You have a visual novel style sections where you're talking to people, you can make choices and that kind of thing. You have an overworld map where you can run around between different mission points, choose side missions, have encounters with people of all different kinds. It's all hand-drawn and lovingly created. It's got a beautiful colour scheme. The writing is good. The music is good. It is in atmosphere very much like a Supergiant game, like something like Pyre. It all feels very well considered and all very aesthetic. It's very fun to look at and listen to. And it also has a card battling mechanic where you will engage in conversation battle and in physical battle. So you have 2 different decks. Shane from the short game referred to it as a double-decker. So it's quite a complex, advanced card game, but mixed with visual novel and RPG elements in a really cool way. I had a lot of fun with this one. In the episode, I did say that I had a little bit of problem with difficulty. It's also roguelike in that if you die, you lose all of your progress and have to start again, which is a strange mixture with an RPG where you're building a character and moving through a story and constantly progressing. So it was a bit of a rude awakening when I died on my first run and realised that I had to go through the game again. But there is a story mode that ramps the difficulty down a little, and that allows you to play the game as an RPG, which is what I did. And then once you've enjoyed the story, you can come back to it if you want that added difficulty, or you can move on to the next 2 stories. So it's almost like they made 3 games out of this great game world, having built these great mechanics. In the second one, you play as a secret agent, which is really fun. You see a different side of the Griftlands. So it's an RPG, visual novel, deck battler, wonderful to look at, wonderful to listen to, very engaging, very addictive, very well polished and well finished. I really highly recommend it. It's on sale at the moment as I'm recording this on Switch and PlayStation. It's also on Steam. That's where I played it on my Mac. That's Griftlands. At number 6 is the only other AAA game that sneaked onto my list. It is a game that I'm still playing. It's a game that I grabbed on sale and really wasn't expecting to like this much. It's a game that came out this year. It was reduced from £60 down to I think 18, so I thought I'd give it a try. It's Resident Evil Village, and I am so surprised that there is a Resident Evil game on my Games of the Year list. I played Resident Evil 1 and 2 way back in the day, and I've given Resident Evil 4 a try on my Switch, but I'm really out of touch with that series. But it was getting such good write-ups and such good reviews and appearing so high on so many end-of-year lists that I thought I'd give it a try. And I have to say, it's an amazing surprise. It's a roller coaster ride of ridiculous horror with the very famous giant vampire Lady Dimitrescu, and with a chainsaw-wielding maniac, with a haunted spooky little doll. It has a hub world, which is the village. This is a rotting, wooden, Eastern European shanty town of a village. And you, as Ethan, have to fight your way through it, trying to get back your daughter who has been kidnapped by a strange local matriarch. And to do so, you have to battle your way through 4 different residences. The first one is a castle, the second one is a mansion, and at the end of each one, you'll have to face off against one of the 4 bosses that assist this matriarch figure. It's ridiculous, I'll be honest. It's so camp, so pantomimey, so over the top and out of control. There is a point at which your character gets a hand cut clean off, and you have to go and grab your own hand back off a door handle to try and escape. There are points at where you're running through death trap mazes. There is a spooky basement where you're chased around by a kind of a grotesque giant sort of sluggy baby creature. And if all of this sounds repulsive and horrible, I will say that I was laughing as I was playing it. It's not that scary. It's so silly and over the top that it just feels like pure enjoyment spectacle, really. It's also very linear, so there isn't much room for error. It really is just a ride. I can't recommend it enough. It looks beautiful on PlayStation 5. So much to my surprise, I have to say, the hype is real. It's one time that I caught hype and didn't regret it. This one was a great surprise, really polished, really next-gen feeling, just pure video game, silly horror enjoyment. That's Resident Evil Village. What a great game. And now we're on to the top 5 Gaming in the Wild games of the year for 2021. And at number 5, we have Solar Ash. So Solar Ash was one of my most anticipated games of this year. At the start of the year, it's made by Heart Machine, the makers of Hyper Light Drifter. It is a transition for them from pixel art into 3D. It is in gameplay a little bit reminiscent of The Pathless, which was on my Games of the Year last year. It's a very fast, fluid, traversal-based game where, as a Void Runner, you go into a massive black hole that is about to suck in your homeworld. It's full of broken worlds, the previous worlds that have been sucked in there, and the remnants of their civilizations. And you have to skate through this world trying to track down your Void Runner team, trying to activate nodes to operate a huge machine that will collapse the black hole and save your homeworld. But the story is interesting enough, but very much second fiddle to the gameplay in this one. You run so quickly through this world, you skate through this world, you grind on rails, you jump and leap and double jump and grapple your way up tower blocks and huge buildings through this psychedelic feeling black hole environment of collapsing civilizations. And it's such a pleasure. The writing is great, it has good voice acting, the sound is fantastic. The music is wonderful. The traversal is on point. I finished it in, I think, 2 sittings. I was very excited about this one. It's about 10 to 12 hours long. I can't recommend it enough. It's a great advert for the PlayStation 5 at 60 frames a second. It ran very smoothly. I'm a big fan of this one. There's something special about this game. It has this melancholic sense of anticipation as you're moving through it. It also has huge boss fights that are reminiscent of Shadow of the Colossus. So if you like The Pathless, if you like Shadow of the Colossus, if you like these melancholic, kind of empty open world games where you just explore and you get modular, atomized storytelling where you find diaries, you find a couple of people around, and you slowly piece together what is happening. It's just wonderful. I really, really loved this one. So my number 5 game of the year for 2021 was Solar Ash. So only 4 games left to go, and now for number 4. This next one is a game that is really dear to me, actually. I played through it several times this year. It's a game that has a lovely, warm humanity to the whole thing. Beautiful, intelligent writing, great bright visuals, an interesting deck battling mechanic where you're actually cooperating rather than battling to try and build a conversation. It's Signs of the Sojourner, and this game first came out last year, but it was ported to the consoles this year, and I think that qualifies it to be on this list. It also went on to Game Pass, where it seemed to appear without causing too much of a ripple. I was hoping that it would get a second wind from being on Game Pass. This game is just so full of humanity and beauty. It's so well constructed. The shape-matching card game that you play allows you to open up conversations. If you don't have the same shape as your conversation partner, you have to play a card that will lose you that hand, and they will become offended rather than happy and your conversation will go in a different direction. So you're actually trying to construct conversations with your conversation partner. You play as a young shopkeeper whose mother has died. You've inherited a shop. You have to go out into the world, find things to stock your shop, make alliances, make friendships, and come back with stock to try and keep your dusty desert town alive. And as you do this, you discover a world that is post-climate. Things have dried up. There are extreme weather patterns going on. There have been disease outbreaks. And so it's a post-climate game, but it's not a post-apocalyptic game. There's no zombie hordes. There's no Mad Max craziness going on. There are just a lot of very memorable characters, very humane, well-written characters who are all just trying to get by in the world. And so it's a really wonderful, warm, generous vision of the future where climate has ravaged the planet, but humanity is clinging on by the fingernails. People are making paintings, people are growing food, people are growing matcha tea. And as you travel around, you meet all kinds of wonderful personalities. It's got little touches of sci-fi. It's got lovely touches of humor. You'll do several rounds of this landscape as you're trying to keep your town alive, and so you'll encounter the same characters several times on each round of the landscape that you make in your convoy, and so you can really grow relationships in this time. The game also has some kind of roguelike elements in that different characters will appear at different times in different playthroughs, and so you'll meet characters at different points in their journey if you replay the game, which is what made me play it again and again and again. I loved this game so much that I wanted to squeeze out every little bit of story that I could get, and I really felt like I'd built relationships with some of these characters, and that's a lovely feeling and a rare feeling. So for me, Signs of the Sojourner was really one of the top games of the year. It's on Game Pass, it's on Steam, it's on Switch, it's on PlayStation. Please give this one a try. It's just wonderful. I also did an interview with Diala Katan Wright, one of the developers of this game. I will leave a link to it in the show notes. It's one of only a couple of developer interviews that I've done, but it was a lovely conversation with Diala. I really wanted to find out more about this game. I can't recommend it enough. That's Signs of the Sojourner. At number 3 is a game that came as a big surprise to me this year. I was aware of it for a long time. I wanted to play it, but something about it made me think it might be just okay, just like a fun game to try. I didn't realize it was going to be as affecting and wonderful as it was. It's a top-down Zelda-like in a black and white world called Chicory. And in this game, you play as Little Dog. You have a paintbrush which you've inherited from an artist, the national artist of the land of Picnic. And with this brush, you have to go out and stand in for this artist who's suffering, who isn't well, for reasons that will become apparent throughout the game. And as this really naive, young dog character, you go out into the world and you have to add colour to it. You paint people's houses for them. You paint the landscape. The artist of Picnic is kind of a celebrity. They really they are respected by everyone. Everyone loves them because they bring colour to the land. But the thing that really won me over about this game, as well as it being just a great Zelda-like with abilities that you get that allow you to explore the different reaches of this wonderfully constructed world, it was the emotional story that really got me with this game. Chicory is the name of the artist whose brush you are wielding, and Chicory is suffering from some anxiety and from some nerves and imposter syndrome and depression, and these are quite serious themes that are played out in a kind of a childlike game that really took me by surprise. The way that the story plays out and the way that it investigates and explains those themes and the way that it lets you know what Chicory is going through and other characters too in this game world. It brought a tear to my eye. There is something very special about this game. It's sensitive. It's very fun to play. Even on a controller, the brush mechanic is just funny. It's like you're using MS Paint to try and decorate a world with these naive splotches of colour that you can create on your controller. I played it on a PS5. You can use the touchpad to move the brush, or you can use the sticks. It doesn't really matter. You're not trying to make masterpieces here. It's playful in the colouring in mechanic. But the writing is fantastic. The game world is fantastic. The music is great. Honestly, I just loved the music in this game. And the themes were just brilliant. I can't recommend this one enough. It was one of the most highly rated games of the year on Metacritic, and I can see why. It's a great package, and it has a great emotional story. That's Chicory.
Come in to me, show us the way. I'm caught between the wind and parts of the unknown. Adored between two worlds, a sight to see. It feels like everything is moving.
I think this one won't come as a surprise to anyone who listens to Gaming in the Wild regularly. I was absolutely taken aback by how good Sable was this year. It's an open-world exploration game with a beautiful line-drawn art style, a day-night cycle, a great colour palette that ranges from bright ochre deserts and grey salt flats to midnight blues and greys when the sun goes down. You play as a young girl who's going out into the world on a hoverbike to find out what she wants to be in the world. She's kind of an adolescent, and as part of her tribal upbringing, there is a period called the gliding when young people go out into the world. They talk to people who have all different kinds of jobs, be they climbers or scrappers who find old rusted metal, or machinists, these kind of pseudo-religious mechanics who build hoverbikes. And there are all these different things that you can do with your life. You talk to people out in the world who have all of those jobs, and you decide at the end of the game what you would like Sable to become. It's an open-ended choice, and you can end the game when you want to. But out there in the world, there is so much to do. There are side quests, there are huge crashed ships to explore, and as you explore them, you piece together the history of this world called Midden. It has a multi-layered history for you to discover. It's very open-ended. There aren't a lot of map markers. You can really carve your way through this journey any way that you want to. I think for some people that was a little loose and they felt a little lost, but I actually treasured that feeling of being just allowed to do what I want. The game trusted me to untangle the story and to just go where my desires took me. And in my case, that meant exploring every corner of the map. There is beautiful architecture in this game. One of the developers is an architect. There is a great soundtrack by alternative musician Japanese Breakfast. This game was just the whole package: the story, the setting, the looks, the sound, the sensitivity of the writing, and the meticulous design. It really is just a one-off game. It was a little buggy at launch, but it's been ironed out since. It's on Game Pass and it's on PC. I imagine that it will come to everything else next year. I also did an interview with the two developers behind this game, Daniel and Greg. I will put a link in the show notes. I also have a whole episode dedicated to talking about Sable. So if this is a game that you're into, you'd like to hear more about, there is loads of material in past episodes. This was just a spectacularly good game for me. I loved the tone of it. I loved the mood of it. It was a real feeling, and I think it will stay with me. That's Sable. And that brings us to my number one game of 2021. This was a really unexpected game that came out of left field and just absolutely blew my mind. It's one of the most surprising, innovative, well put together games that I've played in recent memory, and it is Inscryption. And this really was the year of deck builders for me. I hadn't played a deck builder before this year, but this was the year that I played some classics in the genre, such as Slay the Spire. I put 100 hours into that game. I also played Griftlands, which made this list, Signs of the Sojourner, which made this list. So deck builders became a thing for me this year, and Inscryption is, on the surface, a brilliant deck battler in which you have a kind of a sacrifice system where you're stuck in a strange wooden hut playing against a pair of eyes across a dark table, and you have to play squirrels which you then sacrifice in order to place more powerful cards on the board. As you battle, there is like a tug of war with this mysterious figure. When you land hits on them, teeth fall onto a scale and the scale tips in their direction. When they land hits on you, teeth land on your side of the scale, and so you have to battle until you've weighed down their side of the scale, at which point a map is rolled out and the pieces are swept aside. You can move across this map to get upgrades, to do different things to your cards, to power them up, to win items that you can use in deck battles. And so it's a very effective, very atmospheric deck battler in which you're stuck in this strange, macabre hut. It feels like you're being forced to play this game by a mysterious figure. And you can also walk around the hut. You can get up from the table, you can walk around. There is a clock, there is a safe, there are candles, there are ornaments. And at a very early stage in the game, you'll find a card in the hut, a stoat, that will start talking to you. And there is a metagame in Inscryption. There is more going on than just the card game. The cards start talking to you. There is a whole huge scenario that is hidden way behind the scenes of the game. And as you play through the game, it pulls the rug out from your feet, under your feet, in the most unexpected, brilliant way. It's just full of twists and turns that affect the story, that affect the gameplay, and that affect the whole mood of the game. It's a hard game to talk about without spoiling it, so I'm going to leave it there, but I can't recommend this one enough. This was a spectacularly well-conceived and ingenious game. I'm really in awe of the kind of person that can think in the way that you need to think to design a game this good. The card battling would be enough in itself, but the escape room and the tangled narrative of this game, they're really just next level. Inscryption is a next level game. It probably goes into my top 10 games of all time, never mind just my game of the year this year. It's only on Steam at the moment, but it was nominated at the Game Awards, so I would imagine that the publisher Devolver and Daniel Mullins, the developer of this game, might well be tempted to port this one onto other systems. But whether they do or not, I say find a way to play it. So that's it. That's Gaming in the Wild's game of 2021, Inscryption. So that's it, that's the final episode of the year. I would like to say a big thank you to all of the people who have listened to the podcast this year. It's been a really good year for Gaming in the Wild. The listenership has tripled since the start of the year, and I'm really happy to be talking to you all about video games and the great games that I play. I love to recommend them, but I also love to hear the games that you're playing too. I love to discover new games, and the podcast has been a great way for me to do that. If you would like to tell me your games of the year, if you would like to comment on my selections, or just be in touch, or be alerted about new episodes when they come out next year, you can follow Gaming in the Wild on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube, and on Twitch. Gaming in the Wild is the handle on all of those platforms, and mostly to be found on Twitter. If you have enjoyed this episode and you would like to support the show, get bonus episodes, and join the Discord community, you can do so at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. I'd like to say a big thank you to all of my patrons this year. It's been a really fun thing to be a part of this little growing community of people. Everyone is so friendly and so lovely and has so much to say about video games. People have a real passion for video games, the supporters of the show. And you're welcome to come and join us. It's patreon.com/gaminginthewild to join the club. And with that, I will sign off for the year. It's been a really fun year. Thanks for listening. Thanks to Brad, Reagan and Louis for those great guest episodes. Thanks to Diala, Daniel and Greg for agreeing to be interviewed for the show. I will put links to all of those episodes, those interviews and those reviews in the show notes. So take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great new year, and I'll speak to you all again in 2022. Bye-bye for now.